All right. So welcome to the end of your first week. You made it. Nobody's quit yet, so that's good. And we even had Addie decide to join us on the last day. So 80. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
You should have corrected me a long time ago. 80. I won't forget again.
You will always call you that now.
And thank you to Nat and is it Nat or Nate?
Matt.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, that's what people. now I'm all messed up. Nat and Marf and Marsat are here, so they're customers of ours as well. Anna's on placement with them right now. So we're just going to bang through the presentations. I'm excited to see what you guys have created. But first up in the presenting order is Kirsty. So come on, Kirsty. So Kirsty just had her data school interview about an hour ago, so she's going to present what she presented to us. Get used to it. It's, so you come up here. You weren't ready for this, were you?
Not really. Okay.
Well, you just presented it, so.
Yeah.
So introduce yourself so we have it on the recording.
Okay. My name's Kirsty. I just got offered a job, which is nice. Yeah, so I'm quite surprised. So, this was my second visit for the application. So we got sent a data set that was about the polls for the upcoming November midterm election in the USA. So this is a graph of a collection of posters. I think there's about 1,600 polls altogether. So this is all the opinions together, regardless of which pollster it is or who's being asked. So the line above in the blue is people who said Democrat when they were asked who you would vote for if there was a congressional election tomorrow, and the red is if they said Republican. So with all the data set, without it being filtered out at all, there's quite an arc for the Republican Party. They lose support towards the start of the Trump administration before plateauing out and then increasing again. For the Democrat Party, it's more of a wave effect, and you see them kind of coming towards together towards the end. So I want to figure out if this was an accurate data set, if there's a way to filter it to make it more accurate, if there is a grading system for the polls, and if this was unique to the Trump presidency or just happens with every presidency. Where's the laptop? Oh, here's the Mac scrolling again.
Just go to the next tab.
Next tab?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, hold on. Okay, so.
Oh, it's refreshing again, so do it again.
Okay. It's okay. So this is all the different firms which conducted the polls. So in the earlier slide, 70% of the polls in the sample were by one pollster called Ipsos. So it was important to kind of work out if that was a reliable source. So ideally, you'd want it to have a higher average sample size to reflect a greater number of people's opinions and hopefully reflect the opinion of the general American public. Hopefully it has less bias, so we want something that is more in the middle here. So if the arrows on this side, they generally lean towards the Democrats. If they're on the other side, they lean towards the Republicans. And then finally, this is each of the reliability grades. So they're based on the methods that the poll use, the previous success of predictions of the polls, and I think they take into account the biases as well. So like I say, 70% of our data is from this company called Ipsos. So they're towards the higher end of a sample size. So they average about 1,600 people. They lean towards the Democrats slightly, but not too much in comparison to this one that's very heavily Democrat. And then finally, there is A- rating overall. So they're quite a reliable source, which is good for our sample. So I decided to condense the data to registered voters only and posters of grade B+ and above to hopefully give a more accurate depiction of what's actually happening. Scribble. This was to give the data a bit of context. So I'll jump straight to this one. So this is Trump's approval rating over his first year in office, and I want to compare it with Obama because in Congress for a midterm election, which happens midway through a presidency, since the Civil War, they've lost seats every single year, the party in power, so generally the popularity for the party in power does go down, so it could be natural that it's happened to Trump, it's happened to all of them, so it doesn't make his presidency particularly exceptional. But let's see how it compared with previous ones. So comparing his approval to Obama. Will let me. So this is Obama's approval rating in his first term. So it's a steeper decline than Trump, but it's still significantly higher overall. And then here is a list of presidents since 1945 and their average approval rating. So the net approval here is the approval minus the disapproval rate of the president in their first term. Interestingly, I thought George Bush has one of the highest approval ratings in his first year. And Trump is the only president in this time span to have produced a negative approval rating. So the figures kind of say that he is resoundingly probably the most divisive, controversial president that's been. So yeah, taking the highly rated pollsters and the polls that target registered voters only, so people that intend to use their vote and people that are perhaps more politically engaged, made this timeline. Okay, so it's actually a steeper upward curve for the Republican Party. So again, Democrats in the blue, Republicans in the red. So on the 20th of January 2017, Trump became president, and then a week after that, he signed the executive orders, which prevented 7 mostly Muslim countries from immigrating to the United States, which was met with widespread controversy. So that was a sharp decline for the Republican Party support. Also for the Democratic Party, they were kind of left directionless after the shock victory of Trump, the leader. So there was quite a severe fallout for them. Not long after that, and I would also like to say this is a really condensed timeline because Trump's done a lot in his first year. Not long after that, he launched military strikes on an air base in Syria, which was quite a surprise move for, I guess, the world. Syria is an ally of Russia, so it kind of contradicted what he meant when during his run for president he claimed that he wanted to repair relations with Russia, and yet he struck one of their allies, so again, forward downward trend. I think this is interesting. So, do you think it's interesting?
I think it was in a bar chart.
You prefer it in a bar
That's
chart?
okay, you can explain
Aesthetic.
it.
So, like it says, Trump's cabinet turnover exceeds that of any other administration in the last 100 years. So his senior cabinet turnover is in the red here. It's at 43%, which is more than any of the 4 presidents preceding him, and he's only, well, he's not even 2 years in, and he's already overtaken them. Then in August, the North Korea saga begins, where he threatens them on Twitter. They engage in a war of fire and fury, and then a threat of all-out war in reply. So that doesn't contribute to the feeling of general safety with tense international relations between states and other countries. And then there's the biggest mass shooting that America's seen, so that's when the Republicans really reach a low point in their popularity. But then the Republicans start to come back. So 2 of Trump's main policies when he was running for president was he wanted to lower taxes, and he also wanted to increase the job market. And towards the end of 2017, he does both. He signs a $1.5 trillion tax cut. He also, the economic reports report that unemployment rate is at an 18-year low. GDP has grown and the stock market is booming again. So So in a sense, he delivers on his two main policies and starts to gain support again. And then towards the start of 2018 is when there's talks of the denuclearization of South Korea. The data set doesn't go up until this week, which is when they actually met. But again, that kind of seems to have restored popularity in the Republican Party. And since Trump's in the news so much, maybe the Democrats just don't get much of a look in. But yeah, so that's the timeline, and that's a quick idea of what I did today.
Well done. Good job.
All right, Addie, you're next. AD. Now I'm just going to say it on purpose to bother you. It's the long one, right?
So you should introduce yourself to none of them know who you are.
I know, super
I
exciting.
just thought you were a beach.
Yeah, just a sunset and a picture of my toes at the bottom. Yeah, so I'm 80. I am part of this cohort, except I just went on holiday for 6 weeks, so I couldn't start. Unfortunately, I feel like I've missed a lot. But I'm happy to have come back after traveling from Fiji since 9 o'clock yesterday morning, and then finding out that the best gift I could get is that I would be presenting presenting my interview material. My interview was mid-April, so it's the same data as Kirsty just presented, but slightly
Not
pushed.
quite as much, I think.
Yeah, slightly pushed back. So I think this is maybe up until March-ish. So I'll kick off just with the caveat that please excuse any little mistakes in the numbers because I might have forgotten possibly over the last few months. And all the little polished links that I had all ready for interview, all gone. Anyway, the story that I want to kind of take you through is why the midterms matter. So I look specifically at why we should care about what the polls are showing. I focused on what's going to happen in the House of Representatives because in the House, all those seats are up for grabs, whereas in the Senate, I think it's maybe a third-ish, so it possibly has less significance. So I start with just showing you what we're looking at today. In today's House, Trump and the Republicans hold 55% majority. However, in the polls, you've just seen the up-to-date stuff, which sort of shows the gap getting a bit narrower, but the Democrats have the majority in polling where people are asked if there was an election tomorrow, who would you vote for? So most of the people are going for Democrats. Just as a little point of info, the voter turnout rate for these midterm elections is, from what I can remember, about 40%, which is not fantastic. And one of the reasons for that is that there's a perception that the midterms aren't significant, so they're more about local politics than having kind of national impact. But what I'm trying to communicate to you through this is that actually, far from being just about local issues, the midterms have national and potentially international significance as well. How that's going to work? Well, let's find out. So there you can see, yeah, Democrats consistently in the lead. As we can see through time, the difference between the Democrat and the Republican vote is anywhere between sort of 3.5% to about 10% in the mean difference between the voting, but it's always in favor of the Democrats. So the lines get quite tight. You can see up here. So you get as close as 3% difference, but as far away as over 10%. So it's just kind of illustrating a change through time. How am I shifting this?
Scroll 2 fingers.
No,
Just click from here. You can just. Oh no, just scroll push up with 2 fingers.
not a fantastic, not a fantastic Mac user. So the thing that kind of stuck out for me was when I was looking at those poll results, the Democrat and the Republican scores don't add up to 100. So I wanted to figure out what else was going on. And the known unknown is that we have people who, when they're polled, don't say Democrat or Republican. They say they'd vote for a different party, or they just say they don't know, or that they wouldn't vote at all. So I wanted to focus in on this group of people and look at a scenario where they could have an influence over the Democratic, how they would be able to take the House. So I'm looking at what the Democrats would need from the other voters in order to win the House. So I've started with a little scenario, and bear with me while I try and sort of break this down. So within the polls, there's a margin for error of about 5%. So I've penalised the Democrat score to give them kind of their worst case scenario, but I've given the 5% to the Republicans, so they're in their best case scenario. And in that situation, you can see that there's virtually no difference between the two. So you're starting off from there. So even in this worst case scenario for the Democrats, if we start to add the influence of the other voters,
Oh, it's refreshing. Is it on top? Just scroll down. Just 2 fingers. Choose 2 fingers. There you go.
this is like a big reveal. Yeah, so if we start to add the influence of those other voters to the Democrats, you can see 3% difference. There's still not really any breathing space for Democrats. Start to move on a little bit more.
This is like watching the recoupling on Love Island.
I don't know what that means, but if it's a good thing, that's exactly what I intended. Thanks for picking that up.
I'm surprised you watched it.
My daughter got me
Yeah.
So obviously that, the Love Island situation is really important, sort of.
for the Democrats.
Yeah. But for the Democrats, for them to get some kind of clear water between them and the Republicans, and also to jump up over 50%, the majority line in the votes, they need to be getting sort of 11 to 13% extra, which other voters could provide. So we can give them up to sort of 18, 19%, and that takes them in excess of the 5% margin for error, and also over the 50% majority line. So that could be good news if they could in some way harness these other voters, so give them a reason, compel them to vote rather than to be apathetic, if that's what they are. 2 fingers. There you go. Or not. I do deserve my place here. Thanks. Got it. So ultimately, the big news is that if the Democrats are able to get a winning margin, although you will have a Republican president, the Democrats will control the House of Representatives. And it doesn't even need to be a majority taking that kind of 20% of other voters with them. All it needs is the equivalent of a 1-seat difference, and they'll have the majority in the House. The consequences of that for the Republicans are huge, and this is where we get into the national and international scale significance. So Trump would have a loss of legislative power if you have the president and the Republicans in control of the House. It's very easy to push through the Republican agenda. Second, at the moment, any investigation into kind of misconduct in Trump's administration, misconduct of Trump himself, investigations into Russia by the FBI, all those things are able to be suppressed because the party that holds the House is in control of issuing subpoenas and interviewing for evidence, things like that, for those investigations. So if that were to flip, we might see some more aggressive investigations into that administration. It's unlikely that we'd see impeachment because that's kind of a really big deal, but you could see a big destabilization in the Republican Party as you can start to sort of pick off key people in Trump's administration. And the last thing, which I think is potentially one of the biggest impacts, is if the Democrats control the House, they will have control of redistricting the electoral divisions, which effectively legalizes gerrymandering, where you can artificially draw the borders of your electoral districts to favor certain parties. So you can, if you know you've got a huge majority of Democrats in one particular area, you just redraw, so you can influence election results in that way. The redistricting, I think, is 2020 or 2021, so it won't be the next general election, but
After the census.
yeah,
It's
it's in
2020.
2021. So by 2024, if the Democrats take the House now, that could have the influence over who will take the general election, the presidency, at that stage. And that, of course, in electing the leader of the free world has a huge impact in what happens globally. And that, hopefully, is why the midterms matter.
It's all my pleasure. All right, next up is Lane. So come on up, Lane. I'll give you control. I wonder which caller you are. You didn't enter your name.
One of the three. Hang on. Yeah, I don't have the option to become presenter.
That's because I didn't give it to you yet. Because I don't know which one you are. I'll make this person presenter. Where is it? Why can I not make them presenter?
Does it not show you?
It is not showing me make presenter. Oh, it's because you're only dialed in on the phone.
I'm in there as me.
Where?
Um,
Oh, wait. Nope, that's not it.
probably
Ian,
me.
that's Ian.
Oh, that's Ian.
Lane.
I'm gonna refresh.
There we go, we're up now.
Okay. Okay, Lane. Make presenter. You can see what's being displayed on the screen here. You don't have to plug in.
Okay.
It should say you are requested to present. Good, we go to meeting. Just say download. Add. And then just hit your share. There you go. Hit that hide button at the bottom.
It's a bit slow.
Okay. So I'm Lane. I'm in DS9. And this week we've basically been working with Alteryx. So our project this week has been to supplement our previous data for the applications that we gave in, and then to make a new viz. So this is my old viz. I basically looked at GPI, so the Global Peace Index.
Just keep going.
And so I built like a highlight table to show sort of the differences in the GPI scores. So you have 5 being the most violent and 1 being the least. So you can see that, well, this is sorted in 2016. Syria was ranked as number 1, but you can also look through the different years and sort them out that way as well. So you can see that in 2011, it was Somalia. And then further down, there's this bar chart that just clearly answers very quickly whether the world is becoming more peaceful or less peaceful. As you can see, that it's becoming more violent and less peaceful. I've also built this sort of line graph to show the differences between a country's score and the average for that year. So it's a bit sort of convoluted. But if you look at Myanmar, or if you highlight a country, you can see that data there, and you can compare it with the others as well. So in Alteryx, I basically decided to supplement my data with refugee inflows, and this is refugee inflows into the US. So I wanted to have a look at, okay, where are these refugees coming from, and what are the GPI levels of that country? So in order to do this, I first basically cleaned the refugee data, cleaned the GPI data so that they could be joined together, joined it, and then prepared it for my Tableau. So when cleaning the refugee data, which we learned, I basically just took out all the punctuation to make sure that they were all the right data types. I took out sort of any letters, so like some had like Ocean D, so I took all that out. And then basically pivoted the data so that all the years were in one column and all the values in the other. Changed the data types, took out all the nulls, and sampled it. So I took out all the ones listed as total or unknown, anything like that. So it's just all the countries. Now, the one difficulty that I found with joining this data with the other data set, so my original data set, was that the countries wouldn't, they wouldn't match, because some countries would be like Korean punctuation North. So it wouldn't match up with North Korea in my other data set. So one neat trick that I learned this week from Neil actually was that, so I went into Tableau and I got the longitude and latitude of the countries, and then exported that data for each one, and then I was then able to match up the countries using the longitude and latitudes. So that's what you see here. So this is like the export.
So you added in another data set then with the latitude and longitude.
Yeah, yeah. So I had like 4 different data sets, which is why I've had like quite a lot of join tools as well. But basically joined them together, took out the unknown again, and then for my Tableau, I wanted to create a radial chart. I'll show that to you in a minute. But the problem that I had with this was that it didn't have the record IDs, it didn't have it, so that I couldn't create the circle. So I had to create a record ID for each one, and then because it had a record ID for like 1 is Africa, 2 is Africa, that wouldn't work either. So I had to create a multi-row formula, basically saying that if this was the same as the first one, to return it number 1, and then you can see here new field. Yeah, and then you fill at the end there, but now all the countries of Indonesia is 1, and then all the others is 2. So that was my data prep. And then my final viz is, I tried to keep it quite simple. So this is my radial.
Can you go to the bottom and hit the presentation button?
Yeah.
Full screen.
Yeah. So basically a radial chart that I was talking about before. So the ones with the longest rays or legs, I don't know what to call them, basically have the highest refugee count, and each one represents a country. And so if you click it, you can see that it goes blank.
It's refreshing.
Okay, sorry. Basically, it just highlights the country in this one, and then you can see how it relates to the average in that year. So in this one, I don't have the average chart, the line chart, but you can kind of see that information in this one as well. And I've also got a year filter at the top, so you can see how levels of refugee inflows change, and it's usually these 4 countries here that have the highest amount of refugee intakes, or this side. So yeah, that's my presentation.
Right. Feedback, Alteryx guys?
How is your radial thing sorted?
What do you mean?
As in, which country's on the top?
Yeah, it's basically alphabetical, so it goes from,
Oh, it's alphabetical.
yeah, just
Starts
the
at
same
12 o'clock
as,
and goes around.
yeah.
Right, so I have the same problems.
Can you help him get it set up as well?
Yeah, basically just refresh the meeting. Refresh the tab.
Oh, he's in here now. I see him. Oh no, wait, wrong Alex. Sorry. Okay.
Right. So my name is Alexander. I come from Iceland originally. And as I was making my way through the application process, I came across these questions which probably all of you have asked yourself. Where should I actually rent? And so the thing about the application process is you're not like guaranteed the position, but like I kind of assumed that it would be. So I just started to go straight to the point. As you can see here in the map has the listings of the rental price going from lower quartile average and upper quartile from last year. And so I generally try to have it so that the darker the color, the more expensive it was, but it wasn't always possible because I have a lot of categories here. So you have like rooms, 1 bedroom, 4 bedroom, and so forth. So I had quite a big trouble actually having a consistent color scheme in the grouping. It wasn't quite possible. But the cool thing is also you just don't just want to see the price. You also want to see the different things. And so I wanted to see, okay, like what is like the demographic, the religion, ethnicity, political leanings, and all kinds of stuff like that. Specifically, the area of green space. I was very interested in that, coming from beautiful green Norway, which I've been living for 6 years, literally living on top of a mountain. So it was really quite a big difference to come here. However, when you select so here I ended up moving to select. So if you select that, you can actually filter all of these metrics by select. And even better, you can actually view it on Superline. So here you can see three bedroom property in Superline, straight. So that was quite a nifty thing that took ages to actually build. So that was my original list. And what I wanted to supplement it with was housing data. And here I actually went to, like all other sources, went to data source data.gov.uk, which has all kinds of amazing stuff. I mean, like literally, there is crazy amount of stuff there. And I had a very typical problem when you encounter that I downloaded an Excel file. And like many Excel files, you have like rows separated with nothing in them just to look aesthetic and different other things. And also, as you saw before, I had like average, lower quartile, and upper quartile. And in this Excel sheet, they all come in different sheets because you had a range from like year 2000 to 2016. And so I actually had to bring in the different sheets, the average, the lower quartile, and upper quartile. And then the problem with that is that you can see here that there were, oh no, you can't see yet, that there were no rows and that there were no headers, but the headers are actually in the first row. And so what we learned is that you can actually use a dynamic tool that basically takes your first row and puts it as headers. And then secondly, which I thought was quite brilliant because that would be so helpful, is you can actually filter out the null rows quite easily. Then it was basically just renaming the fields because I selected only the 2016 data. I didn't want any of the other range, just wanted that, and just renaming it. Then basically joining all the renamed and cleaned columns together into one sheet and exporting it to Tableau file. Okay. So, and then you have my second list, which is fairly similar to the one that you saw before. You still have all the other options that you used to have, but now you have this new option of selecting.
Just doing your screen. I should have the line.
So now you have the option of actually buying stuff. So you can go over here, and you can still go over to Zoopla and buy stuff right away. So, yeah, so that was my race.
Questions, comments? Okay. Next up. Yeah. Let's see. Share screen.
Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah. Hi everyone. My name is Louisa, and like everyone else here, I started on Monday this week with DS9. This is my original application. It was because I like traveling. It was about tourism in the UK. You can basically view it from two sides. So what I'm focusing on here is the overseas residents. So that means everyone who doesn't live in the UK, but who comes to the UK. And you can, for example, take a look at how many visits do we have per year. So you've got a bit of a drop here during the financial crisis, and then it would increase. You can see how much money they would have spent. You can see during which quarters they would come. So mostly during summer, the darker, the more tourists you'd have. It's quite detailed, so I'm not going to go through the entire viz. You've got the most popular countries. Well, this is the other way around. So this is UK residents, and then most of UK residents would go to Spain. I think that's not the biggest surprise. Then they would go to France. So the point is actually like there's loads of graphs just detailing where do people come from, where do they go to, how much money do they spend, why do they go to different countries? Do they go there for holiday, for business, to visit friends and relatives? The one thing that my viz did not contain was a map. The map normally would make sense. However, there was a slight issue. That's the following one. So this is what the map would have looked like in the original one. So what you can see here are all the single countries. That's nice. It's perfect. However, I did have a region called Other Africa or Other South and Central America in my original dataset. What they didn't do, they didn't give me any granular data on each country that belonged to Other Africa. So for instance, I don't know how many tourists from Kenya or from Namibia would visit the UK. So Tableau can't break it down because Tableau doesn't know what Other Africa is. And my decision was to actually map these countries. And my idea was to put every single country on the map and then group them and create my custom region. So what I did for that was I created a separate Excel file and just said, Other Africa is Namibia, Other Africa is Kenya, like all the countries that I need. And then I had to join it in Alteryx, which looked like this. So you can see here, those are my two different, well, actually this one. Those are my two different Excel files. So that's the original one. And that's the one where I've got all the other countries. So you can see here, that's basically my region that I've had that I wanted to join on, and those are my new countries. So the problem that it creates, like I could create a simple join. However, then it would say if the value for Africa would have been 20, and there's 20 countries in Africa. And Tableau, it would sum it up. So it would create 20 times 20 is 400. So what I did instead, I grouped it on country level and then counted how many countries were in each of those countries. I mean, countries is the wrong word, but I think you get the idea. So I've got one country in Poland because I've already got that. However, I've got 12 countries in other Europe. And in order to still not lose the detail of those countries, I concatenated them here.
And after I summarized them, I joined them together. Now the only issue is that I've got all my other countries in one column. So I split those things into rows. And then the last step is to create a formula. And as I've counted the countries, divide my value through that. So for instance, for my 20 African countries, I divided everything by 20. The rest would just be data cleaning, filtering certain things out, so I wouldn't have to do it in Tableau. And the final viz then looks like this. So I started off with a map here. You can see here, that's an entire region. So that's most of Africa. Same with other Central and South America. And for some interactivity, if you click on it, you could actually see when people visit the UK. So same results as before. Would usually be in July and September. There's not that many visits from South America compared to what we've got here. That's France, that's all European countries. You could then see how much money people spend. If I unselect that, I've got the cluster down here that's Europe. So people would stay up to 2 weeks normally, not spend that much money compared to the Middle East. You come here, go to Harrods, do a bit of shopping. Well, the other thing you can see is that what I didn't show you before, what age group people fall into. So it's usually 25 to 44, and they would come here and spend their holidays here. And then just because I thought it was interesting, like a bit of an interactive card. So if I want to compare myself to my peer group, I just say I'm female, I fall into this age bracket, and I'm from Germany. So normally people who share these characteristics with me, they would come here for 12 nights, usually for holiday purposes, and spend around £570 during the holidays in the UK, which actually isn't a lot for 12 nights, so I'm not quite sure. But yeah.
Niels? It should, if you go to hit download, extension, share, and then hit that hide button.
All right, so my name is Niels. I also started with the DS9 this week, and my data set is about Uganda. I became interested in Uganda last year because I went on vacation end of last year. And this map shows the political landscape of Uganda, and it shows which district fell to the respective party. So you can see most of the districts, they belong to the NIM, and they have in total 164 parliament members, which are then located here on the right side. So if you click on it, there's a highlight action, and then you can see which parliament members belong to the respective party. So then you can hover over them, and then you can also get their name and the province in which district they are in. And if you click on a district, then you also get this information that it filters the different parliament members in this respective district, and then you can get the information by name and also by gender. And then you have the option to highlight a district. For example, the capital is Kampala. So you can select this, and then it's highlighted on the map. Must be somewhere here. Yes, so then it highlights the respective parliament members, and there's also a within tooltip, which then shows the percentage of total of the respective parties. And so the title is "The NIM Dominates the Political Landscape in Uganda," which you can see since most districts are colored in yellow, which is the color of the NIM. And then to add additional context or to add additional data to this data or to this WIS, I wanted to add GDP data. And what I found was this PDF document. And so I would have to do it by district, obviously. So this is what I found. I didn't find any Excel file. I didn't find any text file. So I only found this PDF. So what I did is just I just copy pasted it and put it into a text file. And then I imported this text file into Iterix. And yeah, I'm gonna go into some detail here because I think actually the Iterix workflow was the most work and is the most interesting. So this is how the data looked when I imported it. It's just 2 rows. In the first row, there's the header. In the second row, there's all of the other information in the table just combined into 1 row. First thing I did was fit out the first row. So I just only have the 1 row where I have all the information which I want. And then I split this row into multiple rows based on the space. And then what I had to do is I had to get rid of the page numbers, because when I just drag this down, when I copy paste it, then it's gonna also copy paste this number 15 here, for example. And this is quite difficult to do because this 15 could also mean, for example, 15 million of GDP. So I didn't even know what is the page number and what is actually GDP in millions. So how I did it was I searched for the text district, which is the next row, which always follows. So it's first the page number, then the district. And then I said, if you find the district, then I think it's here, right? So if you find the district, then update the value of the row after it and name it delete. So I can filter on it afterwards. So then I did this. So I filtered out the page number, and then I filtered out the other headers because they are reoccurring, right? So every time when I scroll down, I will get these ones as well. So yeah, this I had to do by hand. So per capita is being filtered out, delete here as well, district. All right, so then it looked like, how did it look? Like this. All right, so then, I dragged the record tool onto the canvas. Because what I had to do is I had to group these rows into 3, right? Because each 3 belong together. It's a district, it's the GDP in million, and the GDP per capita. So how I did this was I chose the record ID, and then afterwards I divided it by 3. So the record ID starts with 0. If I divide 0 by 3, it's going to be, and then I turn it into an integer. So like the first 3 are also going to be 0, and then when I start with the next one, it's going to be 1. So you see, like here, it's going to group everything into groups of 3. So they all have the same value. And then, here I created just another column, and then here I could then group by this record ID. So then I have the 3 rows which belong together in 1 column. Then I split the columns. Then I renamed the headers, and then I deselected some columns which I didn't need, and then I outputted the data to an Excel file. So that was this. And then afterwards I did the join in Tableau, and then I want to show it on Tableau public. So that's the updated version. So in the updated version, you see, so the GDP data is then here on the left side. And if you hover over the different districts, when it's refreshing, then it's going to highlight the respective GDP of the district. So and then I've put a parameter to select per capita in US dollar or per province in $1 million. So what you can see maybe is that like the poorest districts, they all fell, or like many of them fell to the independent party. So like most of it, it's colored in black down here. So if you hover over it, then you're going to see the district, the name of the district, the value. So the GDP in million would be 4,335,000, and it's being highlighted on the map. Yes, this would be it. Yes.
All right, Fuad?
I think from here.
Yeah, that's right. Just the little download button.
Hi guys, so my name is Floyd. I'm also part of DS9. So this week we've been focusing a lot on Ultrix, which has been quite intense if I'm going to be honest. So to me, for this project, I've mostly focused on Ultrix as well. So the idea is to supplement my previous viz and kind of give a bit more of an insight using a different data set, right? So what you'll see here is this is the map of US eviction levels. And you can see for yourself, it's kind of separated out, so different regions have different hotspots. So what I focused on for this project is this bit here, which is the ethnicity of each population. And what you notice is if you click on different areas of the map, for example, this is one of the highest, South Carolina. It should render. You'll see that the black population is way higher than the average of the entire US. But in my first phase, I kind of just made like a basic assumption. I didn't really go into much detail, which isn't really how I should have done it. So what I'm trying to do now is kind of improve that and give you a better reason why to believe that a black population or an ethnic background has a higher addiction. So I looked around and I found something like this. So this is what is called the education attainment. And this is split by ethnicity as well. However, as you can see, this looks horrible. The problem is I don't really need most of this data. The only data that I'm interested in is the estimate and whether each ethnicity has graduated or has a bachelor degree. So this was the problem that I had, and thank God we use Ultrix. When I downloaded this file, however, there was a download for this file. It didn't look like that. Oh, this is how it looked like. Just a bunch of gibberish, basically. So what this kind of, what I eventually realized is that each of these kind of represent a code to the other data. So there's two data sets, and they kind of match each other based on code, and that will give you the subtitles, the values, etc. So that allows me to kind of put that through Ultrix, because Ultrix has a very useful tool called the join tool. So this is what is called the join tool. So what I've done is, firstly, I've transposed the data. So instead of looking like a massive line, I've kind of separated. So it has a unique code and what that code represents. And then once I have that for both of these data sets, I can join them together, and then it should give me pretty much what each code kind of represents. So you can see this code actually representing geography, blah, blah, blah. And then from here, the problem is there's a lot of data, as in the text is there, but it's not split out. So it's like, for example, like the data is like estimate marginal or estimate marginal. It's not split out, it's all put together. So what I've had to do is kind of sort the concatenation, and that will allow me to kind of have a better view of my data. And then I can filter through the specific text that I want to keep. So as you can see here, these are all filter tools, and I filtered by different words. So percent, I've got rid of population, and then eventually what I end up with is it is going to show me.
When you click on the output of it, what's it?
Yeah, sorry, that's one. Yeah, so eventually I have something like this, so I can kind of more focus on what I needed, which was the percent and whether I have a bachelor's or a high school graduate. And then I would just put it through a text column again and filter through the data, and eventually what it would look like is this. So now I have a very simple use case where I can see the education attainment. I have the race that I need, and I also have to value the corresponding value. So that makes it very easy just to put it through Tableau and create a chart. So
do you have that for each state then?
not
Or
for
is
each state. This is a
total?
entire
Okay.
total population, which I'll get onto in a second. And then what my final views looks like. So this is what I focus on. This is called butterfly chart. This is what I call the butterfly chart. So the reason I put this in is to explain a little bit more in detail about what's going on here. So you'll see that in the east side of the states, all these like hotspots are mostly heavily populated with black populations, and in the hotspots on the west side, you'll notice that they're mostly Hispanic populations. So here, so the orange areas are more Hispanic, much more Hispanic, right? And so what I've done with this education attainment is kind of try to show why that is. So the blue bar represents the amount of population that has graduated, and the red one is whether they have a bachelor's degree or higher. So essentially what you see is quite a significant decrease in black and Hispanic populations in terms of whether they've graduated or whether they have a degree. So although it's not like a complete 100% true correlation, you can make a better judgment and kind of say that, you know, areas that have a more ethnic population have higher eviction rates. Maybe it's down to the educational attainment being much lower in that area. So that would suggest that, you know, they're less likely to get a job, their income is going to be much lower, and therefore they're maybe less likely to afford housing and more likely to be evicted. But yeah, that was my end conclusion.
Very good.
Takes a lot to get a simple chart added in,
I
doesn't
know,
it?
yeah. No, that's why I was trying to focus on.
Yeah.
So, add extension. Delay. Yeah, you're up.
Yeah. So I did my application on the Winter Olympics. It's not showing.
Just the delay. There you go.
And when I initially did it, I did a really broad overview where I was focusing on primarily gender difference and how many events male compete in versus female versus mixed, and men compete in more events compared to women. But that's steadily increasing as well. And I had a
Here you go. Just refreshing.
I had a radio chart where I separated it by medal, bronze, silver, and gold, and every line represents a different country and how many total medals that country won. And then I also wanted to see if there was an age difference of when you're more likely to win a gold medal versus silver and bronze. And for silver and bronze, we have the same median age of 27, but for gold, it's slightly younger, it's at 26. So from that, I decided that I wanted to narrow down my focus a lot more and supplement my data and look at weight and see if weight had an impact on you winning a gold medal. So I found from the same data source a weight, height, and all that information. From that, I just
filtered out my data because I had all the Olympics, summer and winter, and I was only looking at Winter Olympics. So I filtered out to only include Winter Olympics. After that, I converted my date field into a year, and then I had to clean my height and weight because it was really messy and it had punctuation marks. And then I narrowed it down further, and then I had to clean the date, the country, the sport, and the event to be able to match it with my original data set as well. Because with sport, you had a bunch of random letters added onto it as well, or punctuation marks that were included that weren't included in the initial one. And then I used a find and replace tool to be able to join my two data sets. And I used sport to join them together. Following that, I then created a calculated field to figure out BMI. I struggled with the power because how you write power sign in Tableau and Excel was different to how you write it in Ultrix. And then after that, I wanted to classify my BMI because having a number doesn't really tell anyone anything. And I classified it based on if they were underweight, normal, pre-obesity, obesity. And I got this from the NHS website. Following that, I then noticed females. I focused it primarily on female figure skaters. And so you can see here, the red emphasizes figure skaters who are underweight, and the blue represents normal weight. And in 2014, all male figure skaters are of a normal weight, but as we can see, it's majority female. And it's the same thing here when you look at as well distribution. So there were 126 in total female athletes in 36 different countries that were underweight, and only one male athlete in one country that was underweight. So then afterwards I looked at the distribution of the BMI classification. This time gap is because that was the World War, so obviously there was no Winter Olympics. And we can see for female figure skating, more countries are participating, and at the same time you've also got more females that are classifying as underweight. Whereas for men, it was only during this small time period where you had one man in one country that classified it as underweight. But then afterwards, and there's various reasons why female figure skaters are underweight. It's because they have to do jumps, and also like specifically when you look at like gold and how many figure skaters who are underweight win a gold medal, the 60% of them are underweight who are mixed pairs, and primarily that could be because of the demand of the sport. So it's not just that they're underweight for aesthetical reasons or for mental health reasons, it's also because they're required to be light because their partner is lifting them and they have to make jumps and leaps and all that stuff. Because also you see in mixed ice dancing, also 33% are underweight, and then also again in singles, 33% are underweight. And then only 11% at that time was male, and it's probably because it was a really small sample size and it was that person there. And then also, this represents radial fields, and it's by country again. You can see the United States has the most gold medals in figure skating, and then you've got silver and bronze, and how many medals each country won. That's it.
Great. And last and certainly least, I should get a download. Download and then add. And then a little hide button at the bottom. There you go. You're all set.
So this is the very definition of saving the worst till last.
Introduce yourself as well.
Yeah. So, for those who don't know me, I'm Alex Harrison Woods, also known as Big Alex because there's two of us. I decided to go with the data from the final interview, the eviction data, primarily because it is absolutely horrible and it's a blight on my record, and I wanted to get rid of it forever. So, this is pretty much the main page of it, once it actually loads. I won't go through it all because we haven't got that much time.
Oh, I remember this.
Oh,
my
yeah.
God.
Oh, yeah. Because you see, I haven't really thought it through. Each and every single one of these little eyes has got a built-in tooltip. And it takes a while to load, so I won't go through them all now. So I decided to not only supplement this, because apparently there's not enough information here, I decided to redesign the whole darn thing. So the first half of it was doing this. Just quickly put this into presentation mode. Slightly too big for the page, but never mind. Where it is much easier to see, and if you want to look at state, you can pick a state, filter, and it presents you with all the information. It tells you quite clearly the evictions and the eviction filing rates in that state over the period of time, how many in 2016, and it has its height. This also changes to tell you whether or not it's above or below the national average, depending on which state you choose. Just to give you a simple example, that's the wrong laptop. For example, this is switched to Texas. It will switch to Texas, which, as it's a humongous state, the evictions are significantly higher, and such has changed to above. So I decided, I had to sat down and I had to think what influences evictions, eviction rates. And I naturally came to things such as income, employment levels, unemployment, stuff like that. So I went on to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is a federal government a federal body in the US, much like our data.gov, and downloaded this, and actually a few more files, but this is just one example.
Very much structured the same.
Pretty much structured exactly the same, which is why I've spent the entire day doing Alteryx, and yesterday as well. Now, there are a few problems with this. Nice and easy laid out, number of earnings, weekly earnings, people in work, etc., etc. Some slight problems in that it may look nice and handy, but in Alteryx, it doesn't understand why you would have categories and subcategories on different levels. So as far as it's concerned, this is a value of total, and this is the value of nothing. And these are all occupations, even though that's total, and so on and so forth. So, and they're all like this. So I started by I've zoomed out for this. First thing you notice that, unlike everybody else's, it is not in a nice pretty box, because I did not have time, as I've been working on this all day.
Breaks your heart, doesn't it?
Just a little bit, yeah. I know. And this is a slightly even more complicated one, where earnings. Essentially, this part is purely for sorting out titles and then bringing it back to the main data. And then this part,
so you're going to split it up into two parts and then bring it back together.
Yeah, exactly. So I took out all the titles that they believed were part of the main data body, and then did all this, bring that back to the title. Right. This part was extra fun over here, primarily because if you notice, with the exception of this level here, because I'll add them later, these are all nested as well under management, business, and financial operation occupations, and then broken down accordingly. And then later on, you get things like agricultural, you get farmer, tractor driver, or whatever else, which essentially was all of this bit, which was even more fun. This is way beyond my current level, so I won't deny I did have quite a bit of help. Okay. I won't lie about that. And then essentially bringing that all back together again to create an output. Now I got these two to start off with, and
so in general, it was just a lot of massaging the data. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Reorganizing, cleaning the data,
getting it in the right shape.
Exactly. Ready for Tableau to be able to understand it. quite simply. I did all this and then discovered, I couldn't find the original data set, that actually didn't show me any difference. There have been practically no changes over the 16 years. So I, about an hour ago, went into panic mode to find something else, and I found.
So you ignored Ben's suggestion.
I did because
last hour.
Yes, I did. Yes, and I found unemployment, and that was a lot simpler. Less really is more, and that showed me something interesting. If you notice, if I go back into the presentation, right?
What does that Excel spreadsheet look like? Do you have it open?
Which one? That one. Yes, I do. I don't. Sorry, no, I don't have it open, but it is unemployment over the last 10 years. So you missed the first few years off of it. Oh no, that's the wrong thing. Drat.
That's okay. You don't have it right there. Don't worry.
Unemployment over 10 years. That was a lot easier to do and deal with. That was just nice and simple, and that just took a little bit of. Shows up. Just a little bit of.
Oh, that's too easy.
Yeah, move around. Hour ago. Okay, so that, as I said,
5 minutes of work.
yeah, that was a lot easier.
Did you try the Tableau data interpreter?
Yeah, well, they had to do it in Alteryx, so that was part of it.
That was the whole point of the
But this
exercise.
was, yeah, in Tableau.
Yes, because
You can do that in Tableau in about 3 seconds.
because Andy really likes us to sweat, and yeah.
Well, you made yourself sweat.
Yeah. Okay. So what I found was, if you looked at, actually you can see it in this page as well. Scrolls down a little bit further. Okay. What you can see is that here we have the household value and the income over the 16 years, and they all have a perhaps less dramatic but a similar kind of profile. And so I noticed that in the unemployment, we first have this little peak, but over through the blue for Obama, through the Obama years, it has slowly dropped. So the income levels haven't changed hugely. They've changed by, on a national level, only about £500,000 pounds. Sorry, not $500,000. Dollars, essentially in the average income. Not in the average, in the total. So that was basically nothing. I had a little graph that sort of went, yeah, that's it. So this actually tied in pretty beautifully. Yes. And that is almost the opposite. My last 2 days. That's it. That's everything.
You got lucky.
Yeah. Well, in the end.
Any feedback from the game? Matt or Laura, any feedback? Or Laura? Neil, any feedback?
We've just actually discussed it now. Some of these could have been made easier with the PDF connector in Tableau.
But they weren't allowed to use it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But it would be quite interesting to see if any of you could get that working.
So
I was thinking that it's a good lesson in that any data that you actually will encounter in a real life situation will never be nice, and so the hours spent creating is where all your time will be. So it's a very important lesson that I have to teach you.
anybody else? J-Mac, any feedback? Any feedback about the presentations themselves, or?
I mean, it's week 1, so.
Yeah. Remember that there. One thing to remember is that there's people potentially on the GoToMeeting listening. So when you're presenting, if you're pointing at the screen, they can't see you pointing at the screen.
So they can see the mouse?
They can see the mouse,
okay.
But don't move your mouse too much because you'll make them sick. So when you're presenting, kind of the general idea is if you need to use the mouse to point at something, do that, and then take your hand off and move away from the screen, so that way you don't keep playing with the mouse. But overall, really good job. Hopefully you learned a lot. Looks like you learned a lot this week. Yeah. Wait, everybody tired now? Good. All right, well done, guys. Good job. All right. And I don't think we have any feedback online, so I'm going to end the recording.
Is there anything?
Maybe anything else that I do this?